All right, as you can see, I'm logged into the Amazon AWS Management Console. This is my home screen. Yours might look different. If you click on this little services waffle up here, you might find it. What we're looking for is RDS, okay? I'm assuming it means Relational Database Server, so you just click on it. I want to make a free version of a MySQL database. So we're going to click on it, and let's see if we can walk through this process. So this video is going to do three things. I'm going to click on database. I'm going to create a database. I'm going to walk through how to make a database on RDS. I'm going to connect it into using the MySQL Workbench. We're going to make a new instance in there, and then we're going to create the models in PyCharm in the models.py. So we'll have those. So I'm in here. I'm going to create a standard create. We're going to pick MySQL. Scroll down. I'm going to pick the free tier. Okay. And give it a name. I'm going to call this baseball. Okay. And I'll probably end up deleting this one pretty quick. So I'm just going to give it junk password since it will be deleted very soon. I will just never use this password. Let's just call it something easy to delete. Must be more than 8 characters. So let's go something like that. Okay. All right, we'll come down here, just take all the defaults. Not all the defaults, there's one that we do have to do. So when we come down here, we want to say yes, public access. Click that. And then the security group. We want to make sure that we make changes to the security group. I already have a security group that's pretty good that has the thing in it. And I'll show you real quick how to look at your security group. So I'm going to click that. It's going to start up. When I do that, I'm going to just click on an older database and show you what change you have to make to the security group. When it gets all set up, you just come over here and click on the security group icon. Okay, little link. Once you're in your different security groups, the only thing I do is I go to inbound rules for that security group. I click on the inbound rule and I edit the inbound rule. And then you just go over to custom and pick anywhere IP version 4. And it adds this little filter right here. So it should say like group rule ID doesn't really matter. It'll say all traffic. This one will already be there, but then you'll just want to make sure you have a second one called 000/0, and then just click save rule. Okay. If you don't do this, your MySQL Workbench isn't going to work. Okay. So let's go back to RDS and see how that is being created. And I might pause for a second to see how it's going and just let it finish up. So I go into my databases and it's still creating. So I'm going to pause. All right. So that did take a little bit of time, probably 2, 3, 4 minutes to get that kind of going. You really want to get it to a point where it says it's like backing up. So if you click the little refresh button, it says it's backing it up. You got to be careful because if you're running 4 different databases on here, I'm going to delete one of them, and these other ones are more we use them in kind of a real world situation. They're not just for like class. You got to be careful. It's going to cost you money. So one, I think, is what you get for free. You start running multiple, it's going to cost you money. So be careful about that. So once you get to this point, we're going to look at this. We need to get our host name. So we click on the actual baseball, and our host name is here. Okay. So our default database is called sys. So I'm just going to copy this endpoint. Okay. And then we're going to go into our MySQL database Workbench, and you can download it from, I think you just go Google MySQL Workbench, download the whole thing. I'm not going to go through all that. That's a different class. So I'm going to click this little MySQL connection. I'm going to click the little plus sign, and I'm just going to make up a name. We're going to call it like baseball, just so I know which one it is. And right here under host name, I'm going to paste that one I just put in. Okay, and that's the baseball database from AWS 3306, and in the vault, I'm going to put in the password that I made, and we will test the connection to make sure it works, and we'll do it again. I'm going to save it in the vault because it's all going to be deleted. It says it failed to connect, so most likely password is wrong, or the username is wrong. So let's do it again and paste that in. Hopefully I'm typing that right. All right, and it is successful. So it was admin, not root. Okay, so that's good. So once I have tested that connection and following those other instructions, I can just click OK. All right, now we're going to have 3 tables in this, right? So it should be opening up, but let's just see, just in case it doesn't. Let me click on it and see. It says open up SQL editor. All right, there we go. So right off the bat, this is what I see. I might actually see administration, like so. If that's the case, you just click on schemas. Okay, I'm going to come over here to the little drop down, and I'm going to click on tables, and inside the tables, I'm just going to create a new table, and we're going to start with the user table. Okay, so it's user, and then the ID. This is the only one that it has to be a specific. It's ID. Okay, it has to be ID because the way the Flask login works, it has to be ID. So we're going to say PK and AI. We're also going to do a username. So username. That's a varchar, and we're going to do password. Okay. Now for username, we want it to be unique so that no one else can have it. So if you did that, it would be here, and you could just say unique is required. This is just a real basic one, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. At this point, this one's finished, real easy. So it's going to be a primary key. It's going to auto increment. By default, primary keys are not null, just like that. So this is a very good, easy user table. I'm going to click apply again, and you can see it's finished. So that's one table. Now let's do it again for another table. So I'm going to right click, create a table. We're going to do this one called teams, and actually it's just called team, very important. And it's going to be team ID, and that's an int, again, primary key, and AI. Make sure that primary key is checked, okay? And then we're going to come over here, and we're going to say team name. Okay, leave it as a varchar, and then team mascot. Keeping it very simple. All right, I'm just going to click apply, and that one is finished. All right, and now we're going to do one more table. I'm going to keep this simple. It's going to be practice. So it's like the practice schedule table. So we're going to go practice ID, again, auto incremented. So primary key, unique, auto increment. Okay, and this has a different table. This is going to be like, what's the practice length? How long is practice going to be for? So length, and let me length. That's spelled right. That one's going to be a decimal. So decimal, and I'm going to say it is, I don't know, 8.2. If I get off that kind of adjusts it how it's supposed to be. And then I'm going to go practice date. So when is it going to be? And that's a date time. And then I'm going to go team ID. Now, team ID is a foreign key from the other one, so that needs to be an int, not auto incremented, just an int. Okay. Now, this is this is what I found to be easiest. Okay. I click apply. Okay. Then I'm going to make the foreign key relationship. Okay. So I come into foreign keys and I just give it a name, right? So I'm just going to say this is team foreign key, something like that. The reference table is team. So I'm in practice table. I'm going to reference the team table. I'm going to take the team ID and I'm going to reference the team ID. Very important. I want to cascade, update, cascade, delete. When I do that, if I delete a team, it's going to delete the practice schedules for that team also. Okay. So I'm going to click apply again, and I'm going to click finish. Now, this is what most people forget to do. They forget to populate their database. Okay. So I'm going to come over here to user. I'm going to click on this little table right here. Okay. I'm going to click on the table. And in the username, I'm just going to put, let's just keep it simple, admin and Pepsi. Okay. Pretty easy. Delete it when it's done. Click apply and finish. Now, over here in team, let's go awesome and say Georgia and the Bulldogs. All right, let's do it again. Georgia College. And they are the Bobcats. All right, let's apply and apply. Now I can come into the practice and I can just add a couple things into the practice. The reason why we do this is, let's say this one's going to be 30 minutes. Practice date is tomorrow. And what team is it? It's for the Bulldogs. All right. And then do the same thing for Georgia College is also going to have a. So the reason why we do this is we want to make sure that we're not getting errors in our calls if there's nothing in the database already. So I sometimes if we want to format things right, you got to have stuff inside the database. Okay, so we are done with the MySQL Workbench. I'm just going to minimize it. I like keeping it open. There's a couple really cool things you can do. So I can go in, I can create a new query. So I can say this query here, and what I would end up doing, I would say something like select all from, I don't know, user. And when I run it, it's going to throw an error. So down here, you'll see the error says no database selected. When it does that, you just need to say, oh, right click on sys and just say set as default schema. Now this becomes the default database. I can run it again and it gives me that. Okay. And just if you don't understand SQL, I would say maybe freshen up on that. Watch some Linda videos or Google, I guess, YouTube, some videos on that. But it's just basic SQL. And what we can do is we can copy that and paste it into our Python and use it, and which we'll talk about shortly. Okay. So we've made our databases. Now we need to go into PyCharm and set up the models in PyCharm. All right, so we're going to set up our models. We already have our models. Py.py here. So we're just going to open it up, and there's nothing in there. So we're going to start right from the back, or right from the very top. We're going to say from app import db, and what that does is go out to this main init file here, and it's going to grab the variable db. So let's just see if there is one there. That's why it's kind of throwing this little red squiggly. So we go over here and there is no db. So let's make that real quick. So let's just come here and say db is equal to SQL Alchemy, and we're going to pass in app. And it says, oh, I don't know what SQL Alchemy is. Well, let's go ahead and grab that while we have a chance, right? So we're going to come up here and say from Flask SQL Alchemy import SQL Alchemy. Okay, and it looks like that is probably spelled correctly, but we haven't installed it yet, right? So what we can do is we can either go into our terminal, okay, and we can just turn it off that it's not running, but we're still inside our env, so we're still inside our environment, and we can just say pip install Flask, and I think it's just a dash SQL Alchemy. Let's just see if that works. I'm pretty sure requirement already satisfied. Looks like it's already good to go. So it went through and it made sure that everything was kind of like Django was installed and stuff like that. So it went through and it did it, and it installed all the packages, and it looked like it is right, and it's going to come down and do its thing. But what we also need to do is make sure we include that in our requirements document, right? So we go pip freeze. I'm going to pass it to our requirements document, and it's going to go out and add SQL Alchemy to our requirements document. So when we push this up, it works. Now, over here, we notice that from Flask SQL Alchemy has been imported. That's not underlined anymore. So let's come over here and go SQL Alchemy like so, and make sure it's spelled right. I think I misspelled it. So right here, that's all in. That's all good, and we can just call this our create the database. And it's not necessarily, I guess it would be kind of the connection, but we're going to need to add some connection information here. So in fact, if we don't add the connection information, it's going to automatically want to put like the SQLite connection there. But for right now, we'll come back and add that in just a minute. But in in models, notice we have DB now. Let's add our models here. So I'm going to say we're going to do the user one. So let's go Flask login import user mixin. Okay, so that's not installed yet, right? So how do we do that? We come down here and we go pip install Flask login. Okay, and it goes through and installs Flask login. Pretty easy. So if I hit the up arrow twice, it's going to go right into pip freeze. I'm just going to hit enter, and that's going to be added automatically to it. Okay, so we've got Flask login. Okay, notice it'll take a second and it'll put it in there. And then let's also import login. So from app import login, and it doesn't know what that is. So let's go back to init and add more to our information. So come down here and let's create the login, right? So from up here, we can go from Flask login, import, spell it right, import login manager. Okay, so we'll come down here. We want to actually make our login too that we can use. So we'll go login is equal to login manager, and we'll pass app into that also. Okay, so we have that. We've kind of started our, let's just call it, starting the login here, kind of like, so on the init, it's going to fire up login, and it's going to create that we can use. Okay, so we go back over to models. Now login is kind of satisfied. Okay, so our very first model, let's just call it the user model. So we'll go user model. It's going to have, it's going to be a class, and it's going to have the three things, right? So we go class user, we use capital U for user, okay? And we're going to do user mixin, okay? And we're going to pass in db.model, okay? Now in here we have this is where we put our columns. Our first column is ID. Remember, the user ID for user was not user ID. It's just straight ID, and that's because that's what it needs to be for user mixin to work right. So it's the database has a column, okay? And all we're doing now is setting up how to use. This is the model that SQL Alchemy uses, right? So it's an integer, and it's a primary key equal to true, like so. Okay. Then we have a username, and I think I underscored it. So username is equal to db column, okay, and it is a db.string, okay, and I can just give it a number, make it how big it is, and index equals true, and let's make sure it's unique, equals true. And I don't think I did that in the database, but at least maybe SQL Alchemy will check it. And then finally, password is equal to db column, so it's another column, db.string, and this is 128. All right, and we need to do one other thing. This class is an object, so let's kind of like get it started, right? So define get ID self, like so, and let's just return self. So return self.id, like so. All right, and that's all for login up here. Okay, that's all to kind of keep this login thing working. Okay, so if I come down here, we also need to do the one for the team model, and we need to do the one for the practice model. So let's do that next. So we're going to go like so, and this is the team model. Okay, class team, and it's just db model, like so. And it has very similar things, so I'm just going to copy and paste it. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, copy it, and we'll just paste it in there. It's just like up here, ID, team, and mascot, string, all that stuff. Okay, I probably don't need this other stuff here, but I'm just going to leave it on there anyways. And then I have to do one more. I need to make, well, you know what? Let's make the next model too. So we're going to come down here, and we'll go practice. So basically when the schedule is model, like so, and it's class practice db.model. Okay, and in this model, it's going to be very similar. But we're going to have the date this time. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to paste in the ID, the length, and the date. Remember, we also had that team ID. So I want to come down here and say team ID. Okay, and is equal to what? Well, I want it to be a db column. Okay, and it's an integer. All right, but it is also a foreign key. Okay, and what does the foreign key reference? It references this team ID. So we come over here and we say team, which is lowercase, dot team ID, and we need to put in single quotes around that, like so. And then we will go nullable equals false. We don't want it to be null. Okay. And we just have one last thing to kind of make this model work really well, and it's up here. So in the practice model, we added this team ID because it's actually in our model, and it's a foreign key. Okay. And then up here, you could see the primary keys. So, but down here, we just kind of need to tell, oh, by the way, there's a foreign key down there. So we'll just say practices is equal to DB relationship, like so. And we'll call it practice, and back ref equals practices, and we'll just say lazy equals true. And a lot of these extra attributes, I'm just taking straight up off of the documentation. Okay. It kind of goes outside the scope of what we're trying to worry about. It's like the exact reason why they're there. But just know that this line here is used to reference the relationship down here. So you have one here, which is in the main, the parent table will reference that there is a relationship going on down here. Okay. All right, we have one last little table. Notice that we haven't really used this up here, so we're going to use it. We're going to do a decorator. Okay, so it's going to be login.userLoader. Okay, login.userLoader. Okay, and we're going to def load user, so we can use that. We're going to pass in the ID, and we're going to return, and this is a little bit of SQL Alchemy. We're going to return user.query. Okay, and the user, this user is this user right here. So user.query.get int ID. Okay, so it's going to come down here and it's going to grab the ID. Okay, and that's going to be the user, and it's going to be able to use that user ID everywhere. Okay, mostly because it's loaded into login now, login manager. Okay, so that's our models for our practice. Okay, we have our user table, we have our team model, and we have our practice model with the relationships. Okay, now we have to do a couple other things. We need to make our database connections, and I think that this video is getting a little bit long, but we'll do our database connections also. So we'll come into init, and this is where we're going to put our database connections. Okay, so in our database connections, we are just pretty much going to need one main connection. Okay, so in our database connection, I'm going to put it above the other connections but below our Flask. So down here, I'm going to say app.config, and inside the square brackets, this is very important, SQL Alchemy underscore database underscore URI, not URL. Okay, and then outside is equal to what? And the very first thing is what it is. So MySQL, then a couple whacks, username, okay, colon, password. So the password I put was like Pepsi2222, something really stupid. Then an @ sign, okay, @ sign, and then you're going to put your AWS link, right? So if I come over here and I think I want to say close connection, right? If I come into the one that we're doing, which is here, I can edit the connection and grab it from here. So let's just grab that. Control A, Control C, close it. We don't need that right now. And I can just, after this @ sign, paste that in there. Okay. So all of this here is what I got out of the Amazon AWS. And then you just simply go / the database name, which my database name was sys. That's the database name. That's the connection. If by chance you get an error that says SQLite 3, something is wrong with this connection. Maybe you put an L here. I've also seen students have a space here, okay? Or I've seen them misspell it. So SQL Alchemy, that's perfect. Database URI, okay? So that looks like it will work, okay? I think that's just about it for right now. We will, in the next video, we will talk about the login page, and we'll get the actual login page working with some forms.